welcome. So my name is Nathalie. I'm very pleased to have these three guests who are the artistic directors, leaders, directors, I don't know the various terms, founding directors, all of them actually, of three of the most, the most
attractive,
digital, the most attractive, the most dynamic.
Attractive, the best.
Yeah, just the best. The three best festivals of the Netherlands. Arjon Dunnewind founded Impact Festival in Utrecht in 1988, which has really become a mainstay, even a pre-internet festival. Main focus in the very early beginning was on video and maybe media-related art practices.
Yeah, including music, installations, film, video, performances. That's about the scope at that time, the early years. Yeah.
So we're also recording. Then they and from the early 2000s on, Impact kind of dispersed and also created new pillars for its activities. Amongst one of them is Impact Online, in which Impact has consequently been supporting new net art projects and creating also like an online platform and audience for these projects. Vincent Koreman, who in 2005 has been one of the founders of Incubate Festival in Tilburg, which from my distant, I have to admit, like point of view, because I've never visited, I follow them online.
Thank you.
A festival in Tilburg, which is has a strong music element to it, but also diverges into all other kinds of artistic output, dance, contemporary art, visual arts, and would be characterized by its punk or do-it-yourself mentality. This is
Background. Very much a DIY approach to everything, and also just looking at what's interesting at a certain point in time and presenting that to an audience.
And then directly on my left-hand side is Olof van Winden, who also in 2005 founded Today's Art Festival, a festival in The Hague, which often gets coined as a media art festival, but is always the first to find a dismissal of that term by its own director, Olof, because Today's Art does program contemporary art with a large digital foundation, but that's simply the world we live in today. And these practices go alongside dance, theater, music. In recent years, you've also brought a summit to the festival and have been developing also discourse throughout the festival.
Yeah, and some architectural interventions and things like that. So it's actually, we try to present all the disciplines in a festival concept.
We have a few images to position all the festivals here, which I would like to leaf through and then briefly allow my guests here at the table to say a few more words about their festivals, and then we'll dive into the conversation immediately. I'll refrain from pointing out where I want to head to after the presentations. So here I give the word to Olof, who I'm showing a few images which we just sourced online from Today's Art Festival.
Well, I just talked about architectural interventions or urban interventions. This is one of them we did in 2009. No, 8, sorry. This was a landing strip in the big shopping street of The Hague. The Hague pretends to be an international city, but there is no airport. Even the high-speed train doesn't stop in The Hague. And we decided to attack the city a little bit on the international position and to bring an airport. And this was a large piece done by Lust and Mike Reinierse. It was a sound piece, 128 speakers facing the wall with the sound of a Boeing 747, which was actually just a vacuum cleaner. But this created a Doppler effect and a light installation. Aha, that one. This is the Peace Palace. The Hague is international city where conflict management of the world is being trialed with the criminal court. This was the year after the landing strip, 2009. We had a campaign around conflict. The financial crisis kicked in that year. In Iran, there were elections where actually people didn't accept the results and big protests. The swine flu kicked in. We had our very micro conflict. We almost went bankrupt and lost all our funding. And again, the context of the city. So we saw conflict around us, but actually we live in a pretty safe world, and we brought the conflict close by a campaign that was addressing this issue. And actually online also there were 3 films that were presented as virals. And the result of it was that the secret services at that time, they saw this campaign, including the virals on the internet. And for them, this meant that there was a terrorism threat. And they decided, or they arrested me for that campaign.
I have another image from that campaign here.
Yeah, this is another layer in conflict. Conflict has a lot to do with power. And here you see on the right-hand side, you see the suicide bomber with all the symbolism around. And on the other side, you see the dictator with all the symbolism that you see on how they are portraited. And it's me on the picture because I had my own conflict also, and I was quite not pissed off but aggressive at that time. And the designer really convinced me into going on the image myself.
Are you on both images?
Yeah.
For the understanding.
It's pictures taken on the same day, long hair, and they shaved and they added all kind of features.
I have a number of images to kind of portray Incubate Festival.
Yeah, as you can see, they're all very friendly and Brabants, because there are people hugging. Yeah, we're a festival for independent culture, and we've existed since 2005. And I think the main importance of the festival is that we look for a social connection to our city and to the people that live in our city and around our city. On the top left-hand side, you see Dan Deacon, a musician, and Jim and Joe Roche, an artist, together with farmer Jan. They made a film on his farm. He has an organic farm just outside of Tilburg, and they spent 4 weeks there having the time of their life. That movie had its premiere at there's several short film festivals. It's called Hilvarenbeek. That's the village that they recorded it in. And it was a massive event for us to undertake, as we never made a film before. And they told us they could do it, but they are American, and they wanted to rent choppers and machine guns. And we told them that it's not so easy in Holland to rent a machine gun. So we walked into a lot of practical problems, but we nevertheless made this film of 20 minutes, which has been around the world now, which is great, of course. On the bottom right side, you see a girl playing piano and 2 typical Tilburg citizens. And that was a project we did in 2011 called Play Me, I'm Yours, where we put 100 pianos on the city streets. It's a work by an English artist called Luke Jerram. And everybody told us we were nuts. We started out with just having a plan for 20 pianos, but everybody in Tilburg got so enthusiastic that we soon had 100, and schools wanted to adopt them, and just people in the streets and shops wanted to adopt them. So every night they got covered up with like a little cover, and the people that adopted the piano were responsible for it. So it was perfect. We had local artists paint the pianos as well, and you had an entire week. You had the sound of piano music from all over the city. It was one of the best experiences I've ever experienced, I think, just cycling around and hearing piano music everywhere. Sometimes it was just kids, banging with their fists on the keys, and other times it was classically trained pianists and people from the conservatory that took their studies to the streets, just go outside and play. And it was, super. Also, I don't think it would have been possible in any other city for us, because we did this specifically with people from Tilburg, and that was a great breakthrough, because before that we were always seen as like more of a niche, dark festival, and this was like our foot into the door with the regular folk of Tilburg, and they since then we have so much joy with them, and every year they ask us for a new project, and we don't do it every year, one of those big scale projects, but we try to do something every year for the people.
Okay, then I move on to...
Yeah, this is also a pretty good example. A couple of years ago, we were working on an open source strategy. We created a social festival model, socialfestivalmodel.org, which was a Wikipedia-style place where you could find everything that we wrote, all the text that we wrote, official documents, funding requests, everything was online. It still is. And you can use anything that you want from it for yourself. So if you want to start a festival, just go to that site and just copy-paste everything you need. And besides that, we had a large exhibit. This is it, the open source exhibit. We didn't do any curating. It was just like, if you have artwork and you want to show it, yeah, we'll show it. We had over 300 people participating in it. And it was a giant hall, so this was before we had something similar later on in one of the museums. I don't know which one it was. I think Den Haag's Museum of Stedelijk.
So this would be like an analog version of a Tumblr page or of sorts.
Yeah, this is no, not really. It was a very strange mix of people making ceramics, like old ants, making ceramics and doing crafts, but also artists that have now have exhibits all over the world. Everybody was involved, and that was the great thing. It didn't make any difference between professional arts or amateurs, and that made it so beautiful. Every artist got to hang their own work, and created a little space for themselves. And they also did the supposting. What do you call it? I don't know what the English word is. The museum guarding. They did everything themselves. So it was really just a next step in letting everybody know that there's no such thing anymore in the world as a guardian or a curator or something like that decides whether something is good or bad. It's all up to you, and you can find everything you want online or not. And we tried to make an analog version of it in this gigantic hall. And it had so many visitors. It's incredible. It had many more visitors than our museum in Tilburg, the Pond, had for an entire year in 1 week.
So, okay, this is something I'll get back to later about visitors, numbers, amounts. Maybe you've caught on already. It's not necessarily in this panel that we're looking at particular digital art production. In a way we are, but how I wanted to frame it, I'm kind of interweaving now before Arjon starts his presentation, because otherwise I'm afraid I won't offer you the proper framing. Is, in my opinion, if there's one model which brings together a lot of people, it's a festival. This is something I wanted to take as the angle for this conversation. In the various ways this festival needs a momentum and a lot of attention, and brings this moment in which people get together, share, exchange, and connect. And these are all terms that we also use when we talk to about the internet. I wanted to talk about the internet in this panel, and particularly how it finds its use, as well as like in the artistic production, as a means of communication, but I mean the means of communication beyond a marketing strategy. I'm talking about how we engage with other people, how we create the audiences we need, and how we get feedback from them, and how these various models on and offline might influence each other. With that, I pass over the word to Arjon.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a lot of text all of a sudden. Yeah, the Impact Festival started in 1988. I was a student at the Art Academy at that time. Personally, I was very much interested in the in-betweens between the fine arts that as you would get taught at the Art Academy, filmmaking, performance, electronic music. So that was kind of the basis on which the Impact Festival started that time. And I think it was somewhere mid-90s when the first interactive projects emerged and also were included in the festival. And the early 2000s when there was something like really visible like art made on the internet. And in the first festivals we exhibited that in the exhibition in a computer terminal where you as a visitor could navigate a certain website, but already very soon we felt it was maybe slightly odd to do it like that, because why would you go to a festival to see the exact same thing that you could see at your home computer? Well, one reason was that at that time many people didn't have the kind of home computer or a home computer at all that would allow them to visit it, but very soon that changed, of course, and like now people could see the websites on which artists presented their works at home. So we changed the direction. We kept using the festival as a place to present those festivals, but then with the artist presence to talk about them, or in installation formats where it would really make a difference from what you could see at home. But we started using our website as the platform where we would present those kinds of projects. We would present them in a curated format. Also support the artist making new works for the internet with some money, with technical production advice, etc. And that's what Impact Online is. On the previous slide you can also see the curators that we've been working with over the years. But also we started, the artist and the curators already very soon after we started Impact Online, or a few years after, we also started using it as a platform for streaming video, which is of course maybe not the most challenging way to use a website, since it allows all kinds of interactive use. But we also felt it was a good platform to simply offer the videos that you could see at the festival on our website, and again inviting curators, offering our audience curated sections. But now let's go back to the first years of Impact Online, the kind of projects that we did, and that's the next slide.
The next
sorry.
one? Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, the previous one then. This would be 2003. The early years of Impact Online, and already then many artists, of course, used the website, used the internet for the presentation of their work, but also they very often addressed other kinds of networks, mobile telephone networks or RFID networks, or as in the case of these two projects, GPS and Wi-Fi networks. On your left you will see Mark Tudors, a Canadian artist that came to Utrecht to present his project Songlines, which was a project that allowed people to walk and navigate the city using GPS technology, which was still very fresh. I remember we had to go at length to find GPS devices that would allow the participants in the project to walk to the city, and you could use the GPS to leave virtual messages connected to GPS coordinates. So something which is very normal nowadays, and a lot of the technology and the apps that you have probably on your cell phone are based on the same idea. At that time it was still very new, and they connected it to the idea of songlines, which is something from Aboriginal culture, allowing people to navigate over the vast area of the Australian landscape. They came up with songs where the melody and the rhyme would help them to remember the song, and the song would go, okay, when you see the third big tree, go to the left, go to the big rock, and it would help people find their ways and pass on information on routes from one generation to the other. So I think it was a very nice way where Western modern urban technologies were connected to a more historical notion, Australian Aboriginal notion and religious ideas of navigating through the landscape. And on your right, there's a live user's manual by Michel Terran, and that used these receivers to receive the Wi-Fi signals that people would use for wireless cameras. Cameras that you could use for babysitting, and I think they're still quite common, or just to see who's at your front door, or to have a look at the car garage to see, or in shops to keep an eye on shoplifters. These kinds of transmissions at that time were open. Nowadays I think there's a much greater awareness of closing off that kind of signals or using passwords. So Michel Terran invited the Impact audience for walks through the city of Utrecht with these scanners looking for signals, and her website became kind of an inventory of what people would film using that wireless surveillance technology. And then the next slide, you'll see another strand that's quite prominent in the Impact Online programming, and is looking at how the internet kind of is a reflection of what happens in society. And the project eBay Longing from Angie Waller used eBays and what people would put on offer at eBay as a kind of a lakmoet, kind of a how would you say, a graadmeter in Dutch, of what was happening in society, especially on items that would be on sale connected to the Gulf Wars or to other wars, stickers. And this kind of sticker with the cartoon figure is very prominent, where someone would show his political opinion by, for instance, have, instead of your text, the name of a political adversary. eBay became kind of a reflection of tendencies in society, and her project made an inventory of that. Equity Bot by Scott Kildall is a very recent project that does a similar thing, but then using Twitter feeds and trying to connect sentiment on Twitter, happy, sad, anxiety, fear, and to connect it to stock market development. So if stock market would go down, or certain stock would go down, be it from very technological funds or from gold, he was looking for interrelations between sentiments on Twitter and also as a means, not only in his idea, you could use it to, of course, to predict developments in stock trading, but how would it be if you could also turn it around and make the world a better place, for instance, by buying certain stock that would be related to good and positive Twitter feeds. And then there's another recent project by Jonas Lund, but he's here also tomorrow in the presentation. Briefly, it's from last year, and Conversion Pixel is a website that uses input from users, from visitors to a website, to come up with the ideal painting. So ratings of what is nice and not nice in a painting would be used to alter the paintings on the website, and then the final result would be theoretically a painting that is liked by everyone. So
these are all projects Impact Online has supported or commissioned even?
Yeah.
Okay.
What often is the case is that an artist is already working on a certain concept, so not always it's supporting it from scratch, but financially and also if needed in production or technical facilities, we would help an artist to finalize or to start a project. Maybe to close, this is from 2011. The festival's theme was the right to know. I think a very topic festival still, on discussions what information should be available and whether or when, as a citizen or a user, you would be allowed to make certain information not available, to hide it. The right to forget idea on Google is of course connected to it. So the festival, the right to know, was about that. And the Impact Online program that was curated by Sabine Niederer brought together various projects, and one of them, and I choose this one because it connects the online and the offline world in a way, was this installation that would allow people to print their own T-shirt using a set of iconic images, years, slogans, and images, and
Mash
from
up
popular culture
in a
and
way.
mash them up into new combinations, and then have their T-shirt printed.
So I think the first question I would like to ask you all is like, what place the internet takes, or how that has influenced your practices in programming a festival, very simply. Like, has it also, over the course of the years, changed your attitude in what you can show, how you can show, how, like, does this virtual space become more tangible? Is it?
I think the way we approach it, it's completely integrated. As all the other disciplines, because we live in a world where the internet is all around us, we're hyper-connected, and it's almost like treating internet as a venue. You have your theater, you have your museum, you have the public space, and you have internet.
But the internet might be a space which also kind of is very particular for a sense of distribution and also of acceleration. If you would take the way images, such as the images of The Hague on fire, travel over the internet, there's a kind of like acceleration in information, which goes haywire, perhaps intentionally so.
Well, even in reach, it goes way beyond. And I think when we pre-discussed, we talked about this also a little bit. I think the whole year we are present online, and we are doing way more than just presenting a festival once a year in a certain time. But also, all of us are co-producing, we are developing works with artists, we are deciding about venues. The way we do it also is we look at the city almost as an interface. That a building can also be an interface, and the internet can also be an interface. And then you start programming it, and some things fit in a venue, some things fit on the internet. And that's what I mean by being completely integrated. I think we also don't really like to frame a certain discipline like this is media art, this is net art. I'm personally not really interested in the medium itself. The artistic process is the same, whether someone used paint or code or internet or whatever. So very integrated, and as a place where you communicate, where you bring your message to an audience. And that this can be on a stage, this can be in a exhibition hall, but also on internet.
And then maybe Vincent, I can ask you, because it seems also in the programming of Incubate, it does not seem. It seems that there's a certain different approach, that rather than having this integrated sense of the internet as another venue, it's more that as a festival you have taken on certain attitudes from the internet and have integrated that in the way your organization runs. You just mentioned like the open source strategies you're developing. Maybe you can elaborate?
For us, the internet is just a tool, and it's not free, and you can use it, but there's a cost, and that cost is your data, and that's just it. It's like air. It's like water. It's just there. Use it or don't use it. I don't really care. But for us, the big change came when we did the social festival model online, and we tried to make an open source version of the festival so that everybody could use it. And that was fine, and a lot of people reacted very strongly to it, because it was like we didn't protect any information anymore. Everything was online for everybody to see, for everybody to use, free. With
you go a bit into the nitty gritty of what everything was online was, like what did that all to pertain to?
Everything.
Yes.
All the decisions, all the meetings we had were online. Our financial information, our artistic vision, how to write an artistic vision, just everything. Everything that you can ever imagine by running an organization is there. So a lot of people felt that it was really threatening, and because it was also wiki style, everybody told us like, no, everybody's going to fuck it up, and they're going to erase stuff, and they're going to delete it. But it wasn't like that at all. It was just there was a couple of nerdy people that liked to correct spelling in documents that we thought were ready, you know. And that was super nice of them, and it was more like that. We wrote together with people from around the festival, and they helped us. You know, maybe you should do this. Maybe you should formulate it a little bit more like this.
So actually, what you're saying, you had like a really different kind of engagement with I don't
people
even
from
wanna
all
call
over the world,
like,
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, people from all over the world, and that the fear of what you said, like, oh, maybe they'll erase it, came from inside the organization.
No, that came
like,
from the regular
came
institutions
from the funders,
around
right?
us, funders, but also other people in the city, and other people in the country, going like, oh, you shouldn't do that, and it's just like, why should you do it? And we just thought if we wrote this text once, then we can use it, and then it's going into a drawer somewhere of some bureau, you know. So maybe if we write it once, maybe somebody else has some use for this text, and they can use it as well. That's very simple like that. And the biggest change actually came when we made that social festival model, and we took that, we changed that to like an analog version of it, which meant that the organization itself started working more along the lines that we did online, which meant that we started having closer connections to people that didn't mind helping us with stuff that we thought was very boring, or that we talked more to other people and asked other people what they wanted to see and wanted to hear, and how we should do this text, or how we should, what are the main, Thai artists at this moment. We don't know, but there's a lot of people that are very specifically interested in very small niches, and they can help you with so much if you let them. And that was the biggest change for us, to take that online thing to like a real world thing.
That also seems like pretty much an eye opener of having this, like, almost, let me call it like an online experiment. Like, let's see how this works. Let's see what we can learn, and that it then actually like becomes. It's a very optimistic view of the internet in a way of like it becomes a catalyst for like stronger relationships in real life close by.
Yeah, it was a real eye opener when we first did this. It was like an experiment, and then it worked out very well. And then we thought, okay, if it works out online, then we can make it work in the city as well, or like in real life. And that was also a gamble, but we just tried to really change the way that the organization worked. And I think that's still our strongest point, still our strongest side of the festival, that we are very flexible and that we are very open to communication with almost everybody about everything that involves the festival.
Can I ask something?
Yeah. Yes, please. Also, please intervene with each other.
Since you launched this open model, did you develop it, or is it still the same way?
Yeah, we developed it. There's now a new version coming online, because it's so much to maintain, because there's so much data to share. So we're in the third version of it, and I think should be ready like this week or next week. There's a third version of socialfestivalmodel.org.
Arjen, can I also ask you to respond to Vincent's social festival model? Because in earlier presentations also about impact online, it's like, how do you make a platform like that work in an internet which is like filled, anybody can put anything up, and how do you create attention and a quality in a platform? You've said one of the first things you created is creating a hierarchy, and like dismissing or dismantling the comment function, and first making sure that the works presented online are viewed through a community of peers, maybe. So, like, yeah, how do you relate to a model like that, or?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand your question, and also not sure which early presentation you're referring to, but I can respond. Hierarchy is not per se a bad thing. Maybe in the arts it's even a good thing. Openness sounds very politically correct. Maybe isn't also a good model. In all cases, like, I like the whole idea of, for instance, this big art fair where anyone could participate, and I would certainly enjoy to go there once. At the same time, I do think a festival has a function to discern good from bad and present something to the audience, to be an intermediate and a filter, to to give a statement with its programming on how we see what is valuable and what is less valuable, or not valuable enough, at least for us to present or to put my energy in. So if that's what you're referring to with hierarchy, yeah, I do think I like to select, and I like to invite people that I value for their opinion to select, and then compile a program that I think gives a critical analysis of our current situation. Impact is very much reflective, not so much a participatory festival. So we very much try to reflect on how this new environment of the internet, how ideas of commons, of user-generated content, what this really means. What are the motives behind it? Because it's not always what you see it. The first idea of what the nature of a certain structure is, of course, isn't always what's really behind it. So, yeah, I don't know. Is that a?
Yeah,
that's enough for a response, or you are looking
I'm
for
trying to
something
think
else?
in models, like how the 3 different festivals relate to each other in terms of models, and how the organization of the content is structured. Let me say it like that. And what I feel with also how Olof just talked about it just now, and we talked about it earlier, in a way today's art is kind of almost organized browser based, that you just go from left to right from one to another, and it's like very much hyperlinked, and the distance between any of the presented disciplines becomes very small actually, or very shady. As impact functions maybe more like a book with chapters, several chapters, which have very particular functions within the whole impact model. And then if I'm trying to figure out what kind of model I could name for Incubate, but it would almost feel like Reddit or something. Like there's a lot of there's a lot of information there. And you can get lost in it in a positive way, like going from one to the next, but you might not know where you are going.
I think if we try to translate, if we're trying to make a web-based analogy, I think it's more like a Tumblr actually, but like an open source Tumblr. So that doesn't exist yet, does it?
I'm not sure.
I think everybody that comes to our festival is old and wise enough to decide for themselves what they think of something. It's all very subjective for me to, as an artistic director, tell them what is important in their life. I don't believe in that model anymore. I've totally gone off that model. I totally respect Impact's choice, your choice to do that, but for me it doesn't work anymore. As a visitor to another festival as well.
But is that because of personal growth, or is it because this internet, how that created a new environment where that model, as I propagated, has become outdated in your opinion, or?
I think it has become outdated. I think it's like the old model of a museum, where there's a curator, and the curator goes to like a studio and talks to the artist, and we're going to hang these 5 paintings.
So what's a
It's
German
not that
term?
I think
Bildungs,
users nowadays are not able to do that. I'm able to read 50 books and then decide what is a good book.
For
Do
yourself.
I want to spend the time in it? And
Yeah.
that's why I think, okay, definitely major changes have occurred. The internet is and therefore it is important for me. It's not just the same, it's not just air, it's not just like a gallery. We do find that the internet has a lot of the same possibilities that the older models have, but also offer a lot of new possibilities and has very specific qualities that make it different from a museum. So for me it's not all the same. For me, I want to focus on the differences between these platforms. And I do think, I acknowledge that great changes to society have occurred because of that. But I also think that also in this new situation, if only for the amount of time that as a visitor you want to spend in it, I enjoy people saying this is what I think is good and this is what I think is bad. And I might totally disagree with it, and I might even go to the things that you think are bad, because I know I disagree with you, but at least it's a tool for me to spend my time in a more efficient way.
But where do you base your opinion that that the curator has a good opinion on what.
Because
I don't
of
know what
earlier
the choices
shows that
is
is so, because of my opening statement, I hate receiving flyers for exhibition X or Y where there's nothing, just the name of the artist. I enjoy, even if it's 5 sentences, a curator giving a statement. This is what I stand for, this is what I think is important. And I think these kind of platforms, intermediates, portals, are as important as they've always been, and we are these portals. We have the time, I get paid for it, I hope you too, to watch a lot of stuff and decide this is what I think is good, and to come up with theories and ideas behind it, to communicate that to an audience. So as an art lover, you know, I'm not going to go to Impact because I know they choose shit things, and I go to Incubate because that's really cool, but at least you know where these festivals stands for, and that's why I do think, and even as a very participating visitor, you might spend a lot of time in choosing what you want, but still you would make your decisions based on what curators, critics, artists write and how they give their opinion, and I think it's important.
I was with you until you said critics.
Olof.
I think it's great that you do it that way, and that's not a bad or a good way. I think it's just for us that this doesn't work, and for us it's like we feel that this is the way it should be right now, and maybe we're wrong, and maybe
that's actually quite like a dictating statement, like
yeah.
proclaiming.
I always tell everybody I would be a really good dictator for the world.
But
seriously, though.
I think to respond to Arjon is that what you're actually meaning is that it's a misinterpretation of having things narrowed down as a lack of generosity, rather that you take it on as a responsibility and kind of as an effort of generosity to somebody else that you're sharing what you've been investing your time in.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody can choose to go through those pathways or let it go, and you're like independent. Find out on yourself. Spend 4 hours on the net.
It's very much like the internet. If you go online, there's a couple of sites that you visit regularly, but there's always this period when you're surfing online where you get lost in whatever. Like if somebody's suddenly you find yourself
between
looking
12
at
and 2 a.m.
Yeah, you find yourself looking at little tapir babies online, and you know that strange stuff. That's the real investigation. I think that's the real experiment, and that's how our festival is built as well. We bring over 300 artists and concerts and films and exhibitions together in this week. And you
but still, you make a selection, so I don't really think there's that much of a difference.
we don't make that much of a selection, because what I like to do as the artistic director is engage with people, and if somebody comes up to me and says to me, I've seen this Italian funk band that is really great, and they're part of a movement of Italian funk bands, and they're all really, really great, and I don't know anything about it, I'll just tell them, okay, cool. But then do it. Then write to them and ask them to come to Incubate, and ask them to put on a show. Do it.
I think it's interesting because you have a very democratic model on one side, and actually the opposite with more hierarchy on the other side. Maybe I sit in the middle because I feel I'm a bit in there. But it's a bit of another discussion, but a very important one, I think. The role of this curator, and there is a lot of discussion about the super heavy curated shows like the biennials and these manifestas and things like that. That the curator becomes at some point even more important than the artist, at least from my point of view. I think we put ourselves a bit in the middle of that. I think we are more, from the Today's Art perspective, what we do is we try to create a platform. Mm-hmm. And we enter into discussions with artists, like what is the current state of affairs in current society. And of course there's a whole lot of history behind, but I'm not interested in this history. That's part of the deal already. The future is unexplored, is where we go. So it's about now. And if we create a good platform where we can showcase a lot of diversity and actually make the artist shine instead of the curator shine. This is what we try to accomplish, and then create this discussion with the audience in the physical world and online. And that's what I was saying earlier. The whole year we are way more present online in terms of visibility and discussion. And this one time a year we just land down on Earth to make it physical and to present it to an audience.
How do you maintain throughout the year? What are the what is the content you're producing online, and are they very kind of like project oriented already to a next year, or how does the various like
we don't really produce works online as such, like we commission or that we. It's more like I said, the platform as a venue. It's the place where you put your campaign, and a campaign for us is part of the program. It's not just the marketing of it with a nice poster, as you saw. It's very deep, and actually this is our curatorial statement. Instead of making a text that I always have difficulties to read, because all these curatorial texts, if you replace the subject, you have the same text. So we decided to skip that and to put it actually in a different form. In a campaign or online or with all kind of viral activities and things like that. And the social media plays an important factor in there, I think. So, like I said, it's so integrated and so around us.
So, yeah, and so you're using actually like a set number of like social media and well, online tools, applications which are there, but you are also kind of like misusing them, and I mean that in a positive way of like knowing.
Well,
the way
not
you
only
cannot
us, it's
control
also
them
the artists or the designers that we work with that have the feeling to use it in such a way, or to use this medium in such a way.
Oh wait,
but,
we're chatting very.
Time's flying, or
I'm getting the 5-minute sign. It's just I hadn't realized that. I would maybe like to open it up to the audience first before we kind of really get pulled off stage. But Arjon was just wanting to reply to something. Well, I mean, I'm looking at the audience who is obviously thinking over if they have particular questions. I'm
curious if there's
surprised,
people in the audience that have ever participated in a festival and maybe can tell something about that experience, or
just stare at us blankly.
Well, I'm like my yeah.
No, I just find it interesting to think about what you're also saying, Nathalie, about the model of a festival in relation to the museum. And also in the museum in presenting internet art. And I mean, festivals seem so much more dynamic and flexible. So I find it always very inspiring to learn for myself as a curator, this kind of models or formats you can use to find maybe different ways of engaging or attract different audiences. So maybe that's more a comment than a question.
Okay. Well, I can react on it a little bit, because I think it's you know, a museum and a festival, from the outside it looks like they're both presenting art or music or whatever, but a museum, I think 80% of the activity of a museum is preserving the past, and not so much the present. And I think that also many artists, because of these new technologies and internet and code, and they work more diverse. They can work in sound, they can work in image, and it's not necessarily that the visual artist is in the museum and that the performer is in the theater. I think the traditional institutes, which are like museums, collecting the past and things like that, for them it's very difficult to present these type of works and even to start buying these installations, because it's less physical. Sometimes you buy a computer or you buy the code or the software. So I think the role of festivals or project spaces or places where there are exhibitions, like places without collections, I think this is where the new development is happening right now, and not so much in museums.
No, so museums can learn from festivals in that sense, maybe.
The other way around as well, but...
I think maybe as a closing comment, and I'm I might be opening up a whole new, but then we can talk about that over drinks. But I think somewhere along this panel, I got the sensation like what we're actually talking about is like different different approaches to how we feel almost on a democratic scale, like how our ideas of our participation in society changes and who does what. And we were talking about this earlier, so I don't think we can really go into it now, but I find it an important comment to make, or just to land, is that where it seems that kind of like a younger generation or models is just kind of accepting, and this also came back in the previous panel, the tools which are there, and we're using them abundantly and are not necessarily kind of aware or feel that we should be continuously scrutinizing through what kind of communication models we act and move along the world, but so we feel completely free with not acknowledging what corporations might be selling our data, etc., which are kind of like foundational characteristics for an earlier generation of artists dealing with internet, net art, and new media. So that's a weird kind of contradiction almost of the sense of having this ultimate freedom without questioning the context, and at the same time also really just genuinely not being weighed down by...
I think Vincent said it really nicely at some point. He said it's like water or air. It's there and you take it or you don't. But it's such a new medium still also, like 25, 26 years. And there's still a large generation that is born before internet. On the other hand, there's now a generation that's born from day one. They're born, they're
all gonna
connected.
die, right?
And it's there, and you can put heavy theories on it, and or not. And I think the younger generation doesn't really care about that, and they just use it for whatever reason to make art, present art. And I interviewed Raphael Rosendahl, for example, a couple of weeks ago, and what I really discovered in that interview is that the way he works is as a very traditional artist. He's doing research about color, about composition, and the medium for him, it's like it's the medium. That's what he uses. So nothing really changes with that. But the reach is bigger. Like it can happen that you make a cool track and that you go to the restroom, you come back, you have 1 million hits on your YouTube, and suddenly you're famous. That's also something that's completely changing, and that that changes the approach. And I think this generation that is born with internet will take it to another level. I think we use it still for very small purposes, or what we can use it for. And it's still very democratic, and maybe it will become a hierarchical model or something. I don't know.
Yeah, but then in that case, I would see that as a problem, because now you, from that perspective,
I did open up a
that's
whole new
actually
can of worms,
something that we try to address with the Impact Festival a lot. I think we are in the beginning. We discussed also a bit in the advanced talk and before this. I do think we should really scrutinize, and as festivals also offer alternatives for what are the main platforms on the internet. And the internet at this point is still a very open and equal platform, but there's discussion on this thing like, for instance, net neutrality. Who says that we'll still have net neutrality in 10 years from now? If you pay more, you might get better access, faster connection in the future, and that already could change it a lot. So, and I'm also worried a bit about not so much what is possible, but how people will start using the internet. Now it's still fresh and open, and we're so excited that we can do everything. Yeah, maybe it will become just as the older platforms, television, where there's a clear distinction between receiver, consumer, and producer, receiver and sender, which is now still very nice and fuzzy, and you can be both at the same time.
No, I think the internet completely blurred these lines.
Well,
but will it
and
stay
made
like
it
this?
accessible,
we don't know.
But if I can also like suggestively like speculate, is that like one of your concerns? This is speculation. Is that it seems that the internet's all open and beautiful, etc. But you were just mentioning before, like we relate to Google, but Google actually like
we have our Western approach to it.
Exactly, but Google seems like the world, you know, in a one-hand touch, but it only represents this similar kind of predominantly white society which we've been brought up in, and but it creates the fake illusion.
We think that Google is a universal company, and they are maybe in terms of turnover, and if they want to start a war, they can kill us all, because they're very rich. But China is Google certainly not the main platform. Russia neither. India also not. That's already 3/4 of the world population.
But the examples in Russia and China are copies of what Facebook and Google is. So the strategies are not different.
It's Wild West. It's Wild West. Like Google.
Still, but they use
Google
the same strategies, and I do think
it's curating for us,
and
these platforms are not. Google is curating for us actually, and these platforms are not. It's completely like it looks like there's no rules. On the other hand, in China, it's very restricted. But just in terms of numbers of users, this is just a small part of the world, and maybe it looks that this is the most powerful part of the world because we have the knowledge and we have good economies and things like that. But this is I think a bit.
To end on a depressing note?
No, because we think that we are the leading regions in the world, but I think we have to look a bit outside because the world is changing a lot, and powers are changing also.
So break through the glass ceiling, which the internet raises, the fake wall. Okay, we need to round it up. No, okay. Yeah, I'm urgently being pressed to round it off. But I want to thank you very much for your participation.
Thanks.
And thank you for moderating.